Hello and welcome to this short video on the currency heat map from quantum trading. And in this video, I really just want to highlight the essentials of the indicator, what it does, and how it can help you as a Forex trader. And what I've done here is to create a very simple workspace. We have the heat map indicator itself to the left. And then I've added all the 9 time horizons that you would normally have to consider from the 1 minute over on the right hand side, right the way across, and then down at the bottom I've set up the slower ones from the daily, weekly and the monthly. So in looking at a currency pair, you are constantly scanning across those time horizons to get a sense of whether the currency in the faster time frames is bullish or bearish, what it's doing in the mid-range time frames, and of course, ultimately, where it's going in the longer term. And that's what the currency heat map does. It consolidates all that information from 9 time frames and from 28 currency pairs into a table with 252 different pieces of information. It does it very simply for you. It consolidates all that and then it displays it in 2 ways. First of all, vertically in the array, and secondly, horizontally across the time frames. So essentially it is 2 pieces of information. You've got ranking of the pairs against themselves from a time-based perspective, and then you have the individual pair ranked across the time frames and displaying in each time cell whether it is bullish or bearish and the extent of that bullish or bearish sentiment. What I've done here is I've selected the euro pound. As you can see over on the left, up at the top here on the ranking ladder, and I'll come to that in a moment, you can see here the euro pound. Now, as with all of the quantum currency indicators, you can toggle these on and off. So you can either have the complete array as it's shown here, or if we want to isolate a particular currency complex, we'll just click that off, and now we can see all the euro currency pairs and where they're ranking. But let's start with the time frames if we can. And up at the top here, as you can see, the euro pound is pretty much bullish across the time frame, certainly from the longer time frames through into the hourlies, down into the faster time frames. And the only cell where we have some bearish sentiment right now is on the 1 minute chart. So in trading the euro pound on anything other than an intraday very fast scalping approach, and as you can see here, that bearish sentiment is looking very weak and now reverting back to bullish. If you were scalping that on an intraday basis, you would be trading very much against the dominant sentiment for the euro pound right now, certainly from the faster time frames right the way across that horizon of time. And really that's what the currency dashboard does for you. It gives you a gauge of risk. It gives you a snapshot across the entire Forex world, across all the time frames in a very compact workspace. One workspace, in fact, to replicate this, you would have to have 252 different charts. It's just, you wouldn't be able to cope with that amount of data. And as you can see here, we've got bullish sentiment pretty much universal. And indeed, as I'm speaking, you can see there, the 1 minute chart has flicked over to green. And as you can appreciate, I'm sure you understand how the indicator actually works. If it's bullish, it's green, and if it's bearish, it's red. It's very, very simple. So it's a heat map of bullish and bearish sentiment across the time zones. In terms of the numbers per se, the more these numbers move above the 0, which is the fulcrum, if you like, of bullish or bearish sentiment, then the more bullish, the higher the number, the more bearish, the more negative the number. As you can see here, scanning down, if we go down to the euro yen down here, This is bearish, certainly on the faster time frames here at the moment. Certainly more bearish than bullish up here. So we've got minus 3.5 here and minus 1.3 here. And the deeper that number goes, in other words, the more negative it goes, then the more bearish that particular time horizon is at present. And what's interesting about the euro yen, as you look across it, it's certainly bullish in these mid-range time frames out towards the daily, but as you get out to the weeklies and the monthlies, you've got more bearish sentiment, more heavily weighting there. Now, in terms of the ranking, if we move over to the other aspect of the indicator, which is this ranking system on the left, if I just click that off again so we've got everything displayed, the way that works is it basically ranks the currency pair in terms of the sentiment across the time horizons, which are then weighted. Because as you can appreciate, the weighting of a slower time frame is higher than a faster time frame. A change in trend on the 1 minute, for example, would not have the same significance as a change in trend on a slower time frame down to an hourly or 4 hourly and out to the dailies, weeklies, monthlies. So the ranking of the table here in terms of bullish or bearish sentiment for that particular pair is based on an algorithm that takes into account the bullish or bearish sentiment across the time horizons, the 9 time horizons, but those are then weighted according to the significance of the time aspect. And that is how the ranking system down here is then developed in terms of where a currency pair will sit on the ranking ladder. And as you can see at the moment, Euro Pound is very, very bullish at the moment, has been for a little while, as indeed as New Zealand CAD. Then we come down into the mid-range here, and finally down into the heavily bearish pairs. And right at the bottom here, we've got the pound yen. And as you probably know, the pound has been under pressure for some considerable time since Brexit. And indeed, that's reflected almost universally across the pound complex. In fact, if we click off the pound complex there, that gives you an instant snapshot. You can see how heavily bearish it is across the time frames, almost universally out until the slower time frames. You've got all these 6 pairs stacked up down here at the bottom. And then, of course, at the top, you've got the euro pound, which is reflecting the inverse selling pressure for the pound with euro buying. And really, if you take any of these and just run your eye across, on the pound yen, what's interesting on the pound yen, which really has been under the cosh for some time, you can see here in the mid-range time frame, certainly at present, we've got a little bit of bullish sentiment starting to creep in through from 15 out towards the dailies, which is quite an interesting concept, particularly given the bearish nature of that particular pair over the slower time frames, which you can see here. So the message there is that perhaps we are starting to see a shift in sentiment, because what you will see on the time horizons is, and this is true of any multi-time frame approach, a change in sentiment, a longer term sentiment, will always start on the faster time frame. And as that ripples through, if it is a true change in sentiment, then gradually it will ripple out from these very fast time frames, 5s to 15s, gradually it will go out into the hour, the 4 hour, and ultimately you will see it reflected out into the weeklies and of course the monthlies if it is a much more sustained change in trend strength, a reversal in the bearish sentiment in other words. So it's interesting at the moment to see that reflected on the pound. Just click that off, and there we are back to the full table once again. So when you're looking at the heat map, it's all a question of judgment of risk. What you're trying to assess in looking at this information, which is very compact, it's very self-contained, it's very intuitive. When you take a position in the market, you want to have an instant sense of whether you are trading with the dominant trend in your time frame or perhaps trading counter trend. And when I talk about in your chosen time frame, that could be over a 1-5-15, for example, or it might be 15-30 or an hour, or in slower time frames if you're swing trading or trend trading. But what you're trying to do all the time is judge risk and make an assessment of whether the position you're about to take in the market is a higher risk proposition or is it a lower risk proposition. In other words, are you trading with the trend across the time horizon, or are you trading against the trend? And what this indicator will do is give you a very clear picture of what is going on across the multiple time frames that you're trying to trade. It will also give you perspective on what is happening in the complex, because when you click these on and off, as you see, we'll click off the euro there. We click off the pound. We're trading the pound, very bearish at the moment. Let's go and see what's going on in the yen. A lot of sideways price action there, a little bit of bullishness, a little bit of bearishness. There's none of those pairs at the moment. They're all ranking mid-table, so we're not seeing particularly strong moves overall. Certainly from a slower time frame perspective, they're all ranking in mid-table at the moment. Let's just see what's going on with the Aussie. Sort of similar picture there. We haven't got anything strongly positive, strongly bullish, or strongly negative. Having said that, of course, what happens, this is dynamic. So all the time, the ranking here will be constantly adjusting and readjusting. And if bullish sentiment starts to develop in the Aussie CAD, for example, and develops further, you can see it's developed here over on the slow time frame. What you're looking for is development here in the faster time frames, now maybe into the region here. If that does occur, then this will push this up the ranking table, as indeed it will for the Aussie Swiss. You can see we've got quite a lot of bullish sentiment here in the faster time frames, pretty bearish over here in the slower time frames. But if this bullishness translates out into these slower time horizons, and ultimately these are already bullish anyway on the weeklies, monthlies, if this sentiment here translates into here, then this will move further up the ranking ladder. So it is a complete encompassing snapshot of the entire Forex complex of 28 pairs across 9 time horizons. And it saves you all that chart space. You've literally got all that information on one single window, one single workspace. The important point to note about the indicator, just before we wrap up, is that it is time independent. In other words, you can see here, I've actually got it attached to the daily chart. It makes no difference to the indicator which chart it is attached to, so you can add it to a 1-minute chart or a 1-monthly chart. The indicator is not influenced by the chart to which it is attached. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this particular video. It's a very simple but very powerful indicator. It gives you a huge amount of information. It's very intuitive, it's very compact, and it will contain all that information you need to make a very fast, risk-based decision based across the time frames, which is incredibly difficult to do when you're dealing with so many charts and so many time frames. So I hope you've enjoyed watching the video. Do remember that the currency heat map is part of what we now call the currency dashboard. It's one of 4. So you can actually buy it with 4 indicators. This is one. It comes with the currency strength indicator, with the currency matrix, and with the currency array. It's a powerful combination of 4 indicators, but you're more than welcome to buy it on an individual basis and use it in your day trading and intraday trading. You can find more details on the indicator over at quantumtrading.com. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and see you again soon. Bye for now.